LGBT community, you know, our entire lives. We're all different ages and have lived through many different things as openly LGBTQ people. But I guess for starters, you know, just how you have been dealing and processing with this new bill being passed, and why, you know, I guess it's a naive question, but it's really just a very transparent question. Why are people still so fearful of valuing people equally and, you know, LGBTQ people?
Oh, that's a lot. Um,
We got 2 hours.
yeah, like I don't know that heartbroken or upset would even be the correct term. Infuriated, angry, frustrated would be more how I would take it. Um, it always everything is always a fight, right? And the last 5 or 6 years, particularly this country, everything has really been such a fight, more so than it ever was. And it's very unfortunate, but in some ways it's kind of necessary, because I think there was a number of years where people in the community were starting to get complacent because these goals have been achieved. So they've been achieved. Great. On to the next thing. Not really paying heed or mind to the fact that laws can be changed, things can be passed, and it's a constant battle. I also think that, as you were just saying about people being fearful of the other, sure, that's part of it. I don't think at the end of the day it is that. My jaded sensibility um, is that it's about the feeling of superiority. It's feeling better than without having to do better than. It's a lot easier to punch down than pull up.
Yeah, that's very well said and articulated. And, you know, I've been feeling the exact same way you're feeling. I was angry and upset. Don't even, they're so minor words compared to how I've been enraged and feeling. And, you know, as someone who does teach at many different levels, how do I prevent people from asking me questions or feeling comfortable speaking to me about themselves, especially young people who are just continuing to explore every aspect of themselves, and sexuality and gender is obviously a major part of people's lives. And people who might be a Q, right, in the spectrum of the question, not queer necessarily, but questioning. You know, I think sometimes
Hmm.
people forget that Q, yes, it represents queer, but it originally represented questioning and still does. It holds two different words. And, you know, Marissa, you have two children, and how you feel about speaking to them about this, and how the school system, especially, how they take this seriously, and what we do to continue to make sure that, you know, it is spoken about in all schools at all levels, and that people aren't um, forgetting that part of the history. I mean, so much of our history in this world is by people who identify in this community.
Yeah, I'm just making notes. I'll be making notes throughout the entire duration of today's show. So, first of all, I've got to validate parents, because, yes, it is important, I believe, for parents who are involved in their children's lives to be able to be involved in the decision making of what is taught to their child. But I think that parents don't know what they don't know. you know you know and it's really hard when you are trying to convey something to a group of people who don't know they don't know it, and they think they know it and they don't know it, and so it becomes very difficult, the learning curve for things like you know, should we be talking about this in school? How should we be talking about it? When should we be talking about it? Who should be talking about it? And if it was possible for every single parent to be checked into their child's life and to be a good parent and to be involved and to pay attention and not abuse their child or neglect their child or manipulate their child, if every single parent cared enough, right, it would be easy. Because I think the default argument I've heard a lot on this is it's the parents' job, it's the parents' responsibility to do this, that, and the other. Well, not all parents are checked in, not all parents are woke, not all parents give a shit, not all parents are willing to do the work, and not everyone cares. And so how do we not stifle the social growth of these children when they don't have that support at home? So that is a huge issue, even before we start the discussion of what should we teach, how should we teach, when should we teach, who should teach it, is understanding that not every child's going to have that home support. Sex education and talking about sex is very taboo, is still very taboo. And you bring a great question, Lizzie, you know, why is it still so ooh and ah to talk about something that's very natural? We are all products of sex. Every single one of us came out of a woman's body, and we're most likely at some point in our life going to have some sort of sexual encounter, whether it's a positive one or a negative one. We're going to have some sort of sexual encounter. And if we don't talk about what's right, what's wrong, what's yes, what's no, and empower our children to understand their bodies and the changes to their bodies and what's healthy, what's not healthy, you can't even really get into the fundamental conversation of now we got to teach sex, and now we have to go beyond that, and we got to start teaching gender and identification and sexual orientation, because those are so very important things to talk about, right? And so we have to do better, I think, teaching parents what they don't know to help them feel safe and comfortable about talking about this. It's not, we're not going to show dick pics in kindergarten. That's not what this is, right? If you're caught up in that and you think that, oh my God, they're going to teach sex to my child and my child's only 5, no, that's not what this is about. That's never been what this conversation is about. I think that people just like to stonewall everything by saying stuff like that, and it's nonsense. It's a total utter nonsense. It's just like static and red tape, the things we have to break through. What we're talking about is, you know, what is appropriate in school and what age is it appropriate to begin teaching that. And our children learn the best in those early years. They develop the social skills, the habits, the empathy, the community. All of that is in the very early years of childhood. And that is exactly when we should begin a conversation with them, not just about their bodies, but about their feelings, and their feelings about their community, about their body, about what they're attracted to. Because yes, you can be attracted to things as a very young child. But more so, like, the ripple effect is, are we damaging their curiosity by not allowing them to ask questions? And are we dampening their desire to be curious if we're replacing that with shame, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And something you said that's very important is, you know, sex education and health, because at least, I mean, I'm sure this is the same for the 4 of you too. We're taught, where I went to high school and middle school, just heterosexual sexual health education. I think they slightly touch on male homosexual sexual education, but they never talk about, you know, I mean, non-binary wasn't a word to me when I was in high school, but at least for lesbians or women who seek pleasure, sexual pleasure, and romantic pleasure from other women, they don't talk about how to protect yourself and what you do in order to practice safe sex and consensual sex. And how do we move that conversation forward where the country is so divided and we still live, you know, we still live in a nation, really a world that is, it's all men and women. That's sex, and everyone else is other.
I have to challenge a little bit the verbiage that we've been using, because I think it kind of illustrates part of what the challenge here is. It's not discussing sex. we use the term sexuality, and our human nature in society is to identify that as a physical act. We are talking about someone's orientation. We are talking about their romantic orientation. You are talking about the way we interact as human beings and fall in love. The act of sex and sexuality is a bit of a different thing, right? And when we get into health class, it's sexual health. No, they're not teaching sexual health by any stretch. They are teaching reproduction and reproduction only. It is not about sexual health. It is not about keeping you healthy. It is not about functioning well. It is not about functioning in society. It's not about forming positive, healthy relationships moving forward. It's how do you put one plug into one hole and make another human being, because that's it. Sort of you, you're not getting the home economics class anymore, where you're learning how to be a homemaker and do those things that take care of you, that help you function as a human being. We've kind of wiped all that away in what we teach. And in this circumstance, we've never taught that in public school, because we as a society are phobic about those things, and we attach it to we attach it to the religiosity of our history. You know, you talk about relationships and marriage in the United States with people, and the bulk of people will be blissfully unaware that there are actually three types of marriage, not one. There is legal, ceremonial, and common law. The majority of people will not be able to tell you the difference between those two things, because we have bled them into one area, grade them over, and put them through this religious filter in a society that was founded by a bunch of puritanical people that got kicked out of everywhere they went before, until they could defeat the indigenous people, right? So I think choosing those words and evolving the words that we use in talking about it in the future will facilitate the education and discussion of other people.
Absolutely, yes. Reproduction was the word I was looking for. Correct. That's
Yeah.
what they teach. But
it's not how they describe it to us. It's not what they say to us when they do it,
Well, yeah, because they call it sex education. Even I
Yeah.
think there's even a TV show on Netflix or some other platform called Sex Education, right? And I haven't watched it, and I don't really know what it's completely about, other than I just know the name. But how do we make it so that when people go to health class and they do discuss these matters, that their instructors are confidently talking about what it's like for women and other women and men and non-binary people and heterosexual people, of course, everyone.
And I think this is where it cycles back, to bring it full circle, sorry, to parental involvement. Teachers these days, I know so many teachers. I'm currently pet sitting for a teacher. Some of my best friends in the world are teachers. And there is a constant looking over your shoulder at what parents are saying, how parents are approaching the school, how parents are going to respond to anything that is instructed. And you want parents to be involved. Absolutely, parents should be involved. But not every parent has their child's best interest at heart. Not every parent wants their child to be the smartest one in the room. If that were the case, we would not need child protective services. Parents should know what their children are being taught. They should be involved in the process. But the opinions and the personal belief should not dictate what the education is, because education is based in fact and study. It's not based in opinion. You take those facts, you take those education ideals, and then you filter them through your familiar morals. You go home and you talk about those things. How do you apply that knowledge? You don't reverse that.
Yeah, absolutely.
I love that. Like, Yeah, and I know we're talking a lot about the Don't Say Gay bill, and I think that this is the very infancy of our conversation, and it really does have to kind of start here. So if you're wondering why aren't they talking about the bill yet, well, really because we have to go back, right, and we have to talk about the basics and kind of lay the foundation for the conversation. And I think a lot about the age in which children are sexually abused or sexually trafficked. And that is a very young age. And that is well before children are aware that that behavior is not okay. Well before children are told that they can say no, and that no is the whole answer. Well before children ever learn what the word consent means. So when we talk about, what should we be teaching in schools, why wouldn't we teach children about their bodies and the sanctity of their bodies and consent, what consent is, who's allowed to touch you, who's not allowed to touch you, how do you say no, how do you get help? Why are we not equipping kindergartners and pre-Kers with understanding that their body is their body and it's a sacred special place that nobody gets to abuse? Why are we not teaching children that they can say no early in their life? I went through the most of my life not understanding that no was a whole answer. So now my daughters, they're now 12 and 7. They understand that their bodies are their bodies. No one is allowed to touch it, look at it, abuse it, take pictures of it, nothing without their consent. They do understand that doctors are there to help you. And so when we go for physicals, the doctors will ask you questions and certain things like that. But the majority of the conversation is it is their power to say no. Their body is their own. So when we are not conditioning children early, when they are most impressionable, most at the whim of the adults in their lives, that they have that choice, that they can say no. It may not change the outcome for the child, okay? But the child will have more options to be able to speak up and speak out about that. In New Mexico, we have a lot of child trafficking. We have a lot of sexual exploitation of children here. We don't talk about this in schools, if they even were to be in school. But the staff is now trained in how to recognize things like trafficking children. And so because the staff is equipped with the knowledge, they can recognize the signs and get the child help. But why are we not empowering the children to also be able to reach out and get that help, or to speak up or to say no? And they become conditioned over a long period of time with an abuser or with parents who traffic them that this is normal. And so without having an example in like school with other adults who don't treat them that way, who say that that's wrong, they have no way of understanding that what's happening to them is not normal, right? So when we talk about why is it important to begin the discussion of gender in school, sexual orientation in school, your body, making it okay to be curious and to ask questions. When we remove that and we say that's wrong, that's shameful, you're not equipping these children with the tools and the ability early on in their life to protect themselves. And it may not change the outcome. What can a 5-year-old do against an adult, right? But that 5-year-old may be able to recognize that it's wrong and be able to break that by reaching out to an adult. That almost never happens in human trafficking because they're so conditioned to it. And they love their parents, right? Or they love the adults in their life, regardless of that this is happening. By meeting poets in this business and hearing stories from all over the world now as adults who look back at their trauma and abuse from childhood. And if we would have been able to talk about the things that we want to talk about in schools, if they could have done that then, I think their outcomes would have been a lot different. And so, we should definitely have poets on here who, as adults now, look back in hindsight's 50/50 is 20/20, right? but if we know we can change things and do better, why are we just still not doing it? And you mentioned, Joey, that it's, you know, a lot of people who got kicked out of everywhere and had to go conquer a people somewhere. You know, what age is appropriate or developmentally appropriate for content? That is in the bill. And I think that laws are made by lawmakers, the majority of them men. The majority of them have religious reasons for the laws. So you have religious cultural trauma. You also have a huge gender bias. And you have a lot of generational trauma behind the beliefs, the ingrained belief systems behind these lawmakers and these laws.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, and you know, and that also brings me back to like, well, the religion and a man and a woman reproduction, that's how you make a baby. Well, are we also going to say they can't talk about men that are sterile and women who can't have children? Or we're just talking about two genders that want to be with each other? You know, it's
not to. That's a valid.
Yeah, exactly.
Well.
Yeah, and you know, something I was thinking about as you two were talking is, you know, we have books. Even my parents handed me a book when I was probably, you know, maybe I was 8 or 9, about reproduction, men and women. Well, where are the books about how maybe we have to write these books, how two men are intimate with each other, how in other genders, two women and non-binary. So that, you know, where do we hand that child that book? Because you hand me a book of man and woman and reproduction. Well, I've known since I was 3 I like girls. So how's that going to help me? And then prolonging it even further in life, you know, I wrote a poem about it. I'm going to share it on a mic this week. I had someone say to me, a homosexual man, and I don't think he realized, I think he thought he was being funny, and this isn't the first time a gay man has said this to me, but it's not funny at all, and I think it's very offensive to say to me, is scissoring real? And I find that to be very offensive, saying, well, how I choose to be intimate with someone, is that real? I don't question how you're intimate with someone, you know. And so how do we do this so that later in life there's not that offensive trauma? What books do we write? What do we do to safely have these, you know, conversations at a certain age with children where they grow up and feel comfortable and confident, especially when they go off to college, where a lot of people start exploring intimacy with partners, is how I'll say it.
Well, I would say that step number 1 in there, acknowledging that story about someone saying that, I think we also have to own the fact that unlike, you know, two men being depicted in an intimate way, you know, in our society, traditionally, to use the term, two women being intimate with one another is not about two women being intimate with one another. It's about displaying it as gratification for a heterosexual man, not exploring the truth of what a lesbian encounter or relationship is. Number 1. Number 2, I think it's important to remember that, yes, we need more of those books written. They need to be out there. We need people in the community that do that. But we do have, you know, some kids' books to start introducing things. I bought the book Prince and Knight for my nephews. Yeah, and one of my nephews, after reading it, said, "I hope Uncle Joey finds his knight one day."
Oh,
You know, I know there is a female equivalent to that book. You know, I purchased this one for them specifically so they would see something representing me on their bookshelf.
right.
You know, and that book, if no one has read it, it's very short. It's adorable children's book, beautiful art, about a young prince whose parents try to introduce him to all these beautiful princesses. He doesn't want anything to do with them, but one day a handsome knight saves him from a dragon and they live happily ever after, and everybody in the kingdom is happy for them. You know, so we can start planting those seeds now and cultivating the knowledge base for those more clinical books, educational books to come to the fore over the next generation.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. What is the female equivalent of that, by the way? I'm not familiar.
I don't remember off the top of my head,
Okay.
but if you look up Prince and Knight, it's generally listed in conjunction with it.
Okay. I will. Thank you. It's called Prince and Knight, the one you're
Yes,
about the two men. Okay.
Maybe
yes,
we can get the author on here.
Yeah.
that would be wonderful.
And I'm thrilled that book exists, Prince and Knight, and that you were able to share that with your nephews, and that they said that, and that's very sweet. They said it to you after, but it makes me smile.
That's why we have to be honest and be able to discuss ourselves in the world. That's how we do this.
Yeah.
Yeah, otherwise we stunt our growth, we stunt their growth, and then we spend our entire adult life going through a second childhood and puberty trying to find the truth of who we are.
Yeah.
And that's very traumatic a lot of times. Unpacking all of that is hard. My mom is the oldest of 7 kids, 6 who survived. And my uncle was the only boy, and he was the youngest, and he was gay. And I believe firmly that at least 1 or 2 of my aunts is closeted and never came out. Maybe even my mom. So I remember in the beginning when I was very young, he dated women, and it never worked out with women. And then he was just gay one day, and he came out, and it was this wonderful thing. But I remember many not being so happy because of the very Catholic Italian side of the family. But he was always at our events. So he was the life of the party, and he's so amazing. But I think a lot of the trauma took a toll on him. So I've seen personally in my own family, the adults older in life trying to unpack that. And it's very, it's sometimes it's an impossible thing if you don't start, especially early, validating these young people. So just Joey, we have children's books coming out next year. Well, at the end of this year, we're hoping. And it's six characters, 1 book for each character, and so it's kind of like the Goonies-ish in the sense that these children, they're elementary school children, and they're all kind of together, and they all become friends, and they go on these adventures, and it's 1 child representing every race, a major race group in the world, especially here in the U.S. So there's a huge representation for minority groups in this collection. And I decided, I was like, we really need to have a non-binary queer character. And so
Yes.
yes,
Absolutely.
right. You have to. So we have a queer author who is going to be making the character for us for that book, and it's just so monumentally important because not only do we not see representation in children's literature for minorities, we really don't see it for queer children. So we have to start. How do we do that? How do we become part of the solution? You just start publishing books. So that's what we're doing.
Yeah.
It's exciting. And the whole point of it is that these children learn community and empathy and acceptance and friendship and problem solving and love and all of that together. And you absolutely have to have a queer character in a setting like that because children learn so quickly early in life, and they're so easy to teach early, right? Everything for the rest of their life you can set and ingrain in a child early. I always, you had said something in the beginning, say value people equally. I say value people equally and early, right? Because children, they're like Play-Doh. You can mishmash them and make them these glorious beings, or you can completely ruin them. Case in point, at least for me in my experience, and I'll tell you this quick story and then I'll get out the way. There are moments in time as parents we realize that this is you're at the precipice of a teaching moment, and you and your choice as a parent, as an adult, is going to impact that child's life forever, the way that they feel and think about something. And so we have a obligation to make sure we're teaching the right thing and we make a good choice in the lesson we're about to teach them. So my daughter, she was probably, I want to say in the third grade at the time, third grade, maybe fourth, maybe almost between third and fourth grade. And she came home and said, I got invited to the sleepover. And I was like, awesome. This is before COVID. Okay, y'all, don't freak out. It's before COVID, y'all. And I said, that's amazing. Who invited you? Where do they live? Start asking the regular questions. She's telling me, and she says, well, she has two moms. You have to understand, in that moment, the child will look to you for your reaction, for your response. Are you going to go, oh God, we don't deal with that? Or are you going to say, oh my God, that's the coolest thing ever? Because that's what I said. Oh my God, that's the coolest thing ever. Two moms, like, hello, that's like got to be amazing, right? Not just because I'm pro mom and pro women, but like, yes, right? Women, I love it. Let's go. Lady power. So I was like, that's amazing. Who are they? What are their names? And of course, I just did my due diligence like any parent, and I got in touch with them to make sure that they're safe for my child. Just because it's two moms, you still got to do your part, right? It's being responsible. So I reached out to them and I said, hey, I'm Marissa. My daughter is so-and-so. You invited her to sleep over. What are the rules? What does she need to bring? What time? All this stuff, right? And I went and dropped her off. Very lovely women. The whole thing was lovely. She had a great time at the sleepover. When I went to pick her up the next day, I sat in their kitchen for 4 hours and we just talked. Like, and one of the things that they told me was that there were quite a few children who weren't allowed to come. They weren't allowed to come to the sleepover. You're talking about a child who's like 8 years old, maybe 8 or 9 years old, for a birthday sleepover. And many of her friends did not come because of the reservations of the parents, because of the same-sex marriage. Okay, now mind you, these two women have done more emotional work on themselves than any other human being I know. And I guarantee you that these two women, regardless of whatever their past and their traumas were, have done more work than most of the human beings, most of the adult human beings I know. So, like, they're the absolute perfect people to be influencing your child. But it broke my heart, and it broke my heart for this child. Because she felt like maybe it was her fault. And so, of course, now you're having to do some of that unpacking for the child because of what happened. So just, if you're scared, like if anyone is scared about same-sex couples, like, first of all, let me tell you, same-sex couples raise children so fucking well. All right. If you don't have gay friends, or you don't understand, go and fucking broaden your horizons. Go and have lunch, go have coffee, go meet the families of the parents of your children's classmates. Don't shun it, don't hide from it, because I guarantee you they're going to add so much to your life like anyone else would. But don't just say no because of their orientation. That's wrong. And that's not putting the needs of the child first.
I have a question for the two of you too. I don't have a problem with the word orientation or the phrase sexual orientation, but why do so many people, especially in the LGBT community, why do they have a problem with that phrasing? I guess I've noticed that in the last several years more people say sexuality than sexual orientation, which, as we've discussed here, is not necessarily the correct way to.
Maybe there was a sign by someone who was not queer. Maybe, right? I don't.
Yeah. I think also when we start getting into the labels and the evolution of the labels, a lot of them are inherently clinical.
Mm-hmm.
And we as people don't want to be reduced to a clinical terminology. We don't want to sound like a medical condition. We are not a medical condition. We are not a psychiatric condition. We are a human being. And I think a lot of those more scientific terms just feel much more impersonal to people.
Yeah, perhaps, yeah. You know, and
Maybe also too, that's what mainstream media uses. Like that's what, especially when gender and sexuality kind of started coming out into the conversation. Maybe that was the way they could like dumb it down or like cardboard it to make it like not, like you said, Joey, like clinical. And it does remind me, you know, people with autism, for example, totally separate thing, but it has a correlation. All right, people with autism, many times are called autistic. They're given a title of autistic, meaning that defines them. That is the definition of them. They are autistic, but they have autism. The autism doesn't define them. You know, people aren't homeless; they're experiencing homelessness. It doesn't define them. So definitely, when you talk about that, it could be the definition. And again, it's one of those. It's the conversation starters,
Yeah.
right? Getting people out of that saying orientation, and if orientation is a word that I use too freely, certainly that is something that I can rein in. I just you know, I'm
But
learning.
I think it's also one of those things, like taking it back to there and bring into changing the wording that we use. Those terms do date back to a time when we were outlawed, when we were the dirty thing. Those were the terms, the titles that were given to general society as a way to distinguish you in that more clinical way, right? To distinguish you from quote unquote polite, normal society. So there is a tinge of that you kind of that you feel that dirtiness, that coldness about it. I also think when going forward and trying to change the words, we still have to use those words and acknowledge those words and bridge them into something else. You can't one day just decide we're never going to use that term again and and have this like clear delineated break. Language doesn't function that way. And I think all too often we expect it to. I know for me, even as it changes in our community, I still always have a moment where the word queer just like catches me because I'm turning 38 years old in a month. I come from a generation where that word was never used in a positive way. It was never used in a way to take ownership of your identity. It was something that was used when you were being literally or figuratively beaten down. You know, that that is, even as we take ownership of that word and I can use it freely, that baggage will always be there. That sense memory will always be there. It is imprinted and nothing will ever take that away.
The other thing that I found like really disturbing about the fucking bill, and I like to use profanity. I feel very passionately about things. So
do you?
it's a damn adult show.
I've never heard you use a
Netflix
swear word
special.
ever.
We can use profanity like this is a Netflix special, right? So one of the things that bothers me, like righteously bothers me, is how completely underestimated children are. Okay. Uh have I wonder if all the people who wrote this damn bill actually spoke to queer children or trans children to get their damn opinion, not their opinion, to understand how these children feel about who they are. I volunteered from pre-K all the way up through 6th grade now, with my children's schools and in their classrooms on a weekly basis. I have had a lot of time under my belt to work with children. I'm not a teacher. I'm not a medical professional. I'm just a mom. I'm a volunteer who works a lot with children in the school system. from all different backgrounds, ethnic backgrounds, racial backgrounds, cultural, religious, gender backgrounds, like the whole plethora of children, okay? And they know who they are a lot faster than adults give them credit for. I gotta say that. Children know who they are. They may not know what they want to be or what they want to do or what, but they know what excites them. They know what scares them. They know what makes them happy. They know what makes them sad. They know what they want to keep doing, and they know what they don't want to keep doing. They understand when adults are involved in their life and then when adults aren't involved. So we're not crediting these children with understanding how they feel, and we're not validating them for their feelings. Trans children have an incredible grip on who they are. And no, it is not influenced because, oh my God, their parents are gay. Or, oh my God, their friends are gay. They're going to catch it like an infection. No, it has nothing to do with that, for the love of all things holy. You're not gonna get a disease. Gay is not a disease. And it is not something you can teach a child. They feel it. It's who they are. It is part of them. When they come out the womb, they take their first breath, they're destined to be this way. You can't coach gay out of a kid. You can't take them to a clinic and treat them medically or medicinally or chemically. You can't do that. It doesn't work. But holy shit, queer kids are some of the strongest fucking human beings I've ever met, if they survive. And I have to say that because we can't leave today without talking about child suicide. That is huge. So when I get off this soapbox, we'll get onto that soapbox. But these lawmakers who just said we can't say gay, we can't be talking about gay in schools. Not only is it ostracizing these children, but it's not teaching the kids how to accept and ask questions and be curious about their peers. It's okay to be curious about gay people. It's not okay to be an asshole and to reduce gay people or to hurt or manipulate gay people. And not just gay people, anybody, right? Be curious, validate the curiosity. It's okay that they're curious about, they're not gonna catch it. That's me.
Well, that's the other thing. It's like people don't realize it's biology. You're born this way. Isn't that what Lady Gaga said? You're born this way. It's not, I've known since I was 3. I didn't know what lesbian or queer or dyke or bisexual or homosexual was at 3, but I knew I had a crush on a girl at age 3 in playgroups and, nursery school. And I know I'm not the only 3-year-old in the world to have a crush on the same gender or opposite gender, but it didn't matter to me what that label was. I was like, oh, I like her.
And it's okay to let kids experiment and explore. Let me open this door real quick, but I'm right.
Yeah, sure. Or, sitting in a movie theater at age 7 having a crush on Meg from Hercules.
Yeah,
I didn't have a crush on Hercules.
The amount of Aladdin action figures and dolls that I had with that vest and those balloon pants.
Yeah.
Yes, please. Thank you, Walt Disney Company. Thank you, Disney Renaissance.
Yeah, Anastasia and Meg were my animated crushes. They came out the same year as that movie, right? But I wasn't looking at Dimitri. I wasn't looking at Herc. I was looking at Anastasia and Meg. And I didn't have shame in the fact that I was looking at them.
And when I was the teeny tiny little gay boy, twirling flags, tap dancing, taking dance classes, wanting to act, playing the French horn, etc., in the middle of Central Texas on an army base with farms where I was still riding horses and learning how to shoot a gun, I would close the door and I would be singing On My Own from Les Mis, not Stars. I wasn't singing, Agony from Into the Woods. I thought I was Joanna Gleason. You inherently connect with that material that speaks to how you're feeling, even when you don't understand how to verbalize that to someone else. You connect with it on a root level because there is your truth within it. Someone
Yeah.
can't someone can't rip that out of you. Someone can't change that. And when you say don't say gay, you don't make somebody disappear. It does not work that way. All you do is isolate them and make them feel more alone.
Yeah. And it's also not right. It's so, gay is one part of the community. Like
Yeah,
how many people are in this world?
yeah,
Well, I mean, we know what they mean by it, but
yeah. But
yeah,
yeah, welcome to the United States, where something is only memorable if you can fit it on a bumper sticker.
exactly. And that makes me even sadder that there are bumper stickers now or
Yeah.
hashtags of the people who do discriminate, of hashtag don't say gay, and hash or have a bumper sticker on their car of I support this bill and I support DeSantis, and it's just it it truly is just you're watching a nightmare.
Yeah.
And
So much
yeah,
violence against queer well, and if you if the term queer I should change, Jody, let me know, please. But
Oh
this
no, please, like use it. It is
but
the term of the community.
so much violence has been unleashed, I think, on this community is also done by people who had very gay tendencies, who had so much shame um,
Hmm.
expressed to them that there was
oh yeah,
something fundamentally wrong with them. And so, again, by validating people early, allowing them to work through their curiosities, supporting the process does not mean that you have to agree with the choices that your child makes. And yes, children aren't great all the time at making good choices. Like, I wouldn't let my 7-year-old drive my car. Okay. I let my 7-year-old pick out what clothes she's gonna wear, what food is she's gonna eat, and I don't let her eat chocolate all day. Let's not be crazy, right? I give her choices for dinner. She can pick her choices. I give her choices for which time she would like her bath, which time, which book she's gonna read tonight, what time she's gonna start her homework. I give her choices and support those choices because the consequences early are very inexpensive, right? But not allowing your child to have a choice is not allowing them to practice making good decisions. And they really need to learn how to make good decisions so that they can make them as adults when the consequences are much, much more expensive. And so by not giving these kids the knowledge and the tools, not validating them, and not giving them a safe place to express who they are, or at least try to vacation in who they want to be, right? To explore that. You're allowing them to just, you're almost forcing them to accept life as it is, not as they feel it they want. And I think the wants of children are so very important and valid, and they shouldn't be shunned for it. But I understand that the denial for adults is a huge thing. And I believe fiercely, like, even in Texas, like they're, how they're banning books and the whole, oh my God, the whole race theory. We could go on and on about that. But I think a lot of that has to do with adult denial. That is a drip trickle down effect of generational, cultural, religious, gender traumas. And I believe there's a lot of sexual trauma that adults have that they won't unpack, that they pass to their children. And that's one of the big reasons they don't want their children to discover who they are. And I don't think that just because it didn't work out for you doesn't mean it's not work out for your kids. Or, yeah, maybe you were gay, but you're still in denial about it. It doesn't mean your kid can't come out as gay. It doesn't mean you can't support that effort. So adults have a lot of fucking work to do, a lot more than kids, and we're making our shit their shit, and that is wrong.
yeah, and that
I do have a response to that. I I think there is, and I noticed this within the community, specifically among gay men. I do work a lot in gay, queer, and lesbian spaces. I see the older generation in their 50s, in their 60s, in their 70s. I see the 21-year-olds just showing up, right? And we have the missing generation in between. Thank you to the AIDS epidemic and the Reagan administration, but that's a topic for another day. Bridging that gap is exceedingly difficult because there are so many missing in between. And there is much more perceived freedom now. And the older generation that struggled so much and had to live in such secrecy, in some ways resents that younger generation for having that freedom, and the younger generation resents the older generation for not getting why they can just be. And I think you can translate that to society as a larger whole, where the older generation bringing up the next generation doesn't want to have to deal with it, doesn't like the fact that there's more freedom coming that they didn't have, and they resent the younger generation for it and they take it out. I also think, last point on that, we as a people love to talk about the innocence of childhood, even while we make them do active shooter drills in kindergarten. The innocence of a child. When it comes to this, you are not preserving the innocence of a child. You are confusing innocence and ignorance.
100%. Yeah.
You can be innocent and very knowledgeable.
Yeah. And I definitely, I did add it to, I did add it to my list. We should talk about the AIDS epidemic and the Reagan administration. We'd love to have you back for that, Joey. And we do talk about that in the future. But sorry, what were you going to say?
There's a soapbox there.
Oh, we will proudly let you stand on that Zoom soapbox.
It totally goes back to, again, underestimating children, underestimating their intelligence, that they're understanding who they are. Children are incredible.
Yeah, and I'm not gonna, it's not verbatim what I was gonna say, but if you both know the movie Mrs. Doubtfire, and he's sitting in his interview talking about why he wants to do a different version of a children's show that he's being interviewed for. And he says, Robin Williams' character says something along the lines, I'm not going to say it correctly. He says, like, don't talk down to kids. They're just smaller versions of us, or they're tiny humans. And we still don't learn from that. And like for me, as I've been hearing you two talk, I think about how, my parents called me an angry child. And instead of trying to talk to me about it, like Robin Williams says, they stuck me in therapy. And that kind of traumatized me. And then I didn't go back to therapy until my own terms, till I was 29 years old. So that was like a 21-year gap for me. And instead of sitting down with a child, whatever the subject is, especially about sexual orientation and gender identity, that, why are you behaving this way? Would you like to talk to someone else other than your family? In small words. It doesn't have to be these fluffy sentences we make up for people, just basic conversation, because there's no reason an 8-year-old can't comprehend what I just said. And will potentially, depending on the child, feel confident to say, yeah, maybe I'd be okay sitting down with someone that is not my family, talking them about how I feel. I'm just breaking, like, kind of like you said about food, children sometimes like not have their food touch, right? So they have their different dividers in the plate, kind of like that, right?
Mash it all up. It's going to the same place.
I like to mash my shit up too, but that, you know what I'm saying? Like, it just helps to kind of have those little sections divided off, right? To take their little bites off for them to eat so that they can digest it properly and not wait 21 years to then sit in therapy and talk to someone who is not family or friend about the experiences of the course of their whole life.
Speaking to that point really quickly, sorry, just so I can make sure that we do touch on it. If not now, then later on.
Yeah.
They did take it out of the bill, but the required reporting of children coming out or exploring themselves,
yeah,
and that issue of safety is something that we do need to address within within this time frame.
Yeah, we can talk about it right now if you'd like.
Well, I was gonna read you real quick. So I always feel like it's good. Hang on. All right, my family's coming back. They're gonna be quiet while we talk about this. So this was my post, and I will read some of the pros and cons statements on here because I always think it's a good idea to share some of the opposing opinions on stuff. All right. I said kindergarten is exactly where the sexual orientation and gender identity conversation should begin. Acceptance, empathy, identity, love, community, friendship, curiosity. Teach love, not hate. Kids know more than you think and sooner than you think they should. Love and support our children for who they are, not who you want them to be. So some of the comments were, it's not the school's place to teach this kind of stuff, period. This should be taught at home if parents choose to, especially that young.
Yeah, and I remember the person that commented when you made the post.
Then there's this one. This was by a teacher. She says, amen. I had a second grader transitioning this year, and the class had some very good discussions. Kids are so smart and kind and accepting. They deserve to be who they are. Then someone else said, this is really tough because children are not capable of making an informed decision about changing their gender, which they can never really do. Your XY makeup is fixed. In my opinion, parents who allow or encourage gender modification or transition in their child is complete dereliction of their basic duty. But that's me. With that said, of course, this stuff will come up at school because it's going on at home. I don't think schools should encourage it. My whole view on this is scripture based. So it's way off from what the culture says is correct. Then there was another one that said, I would have lost so many fewer young friends to suicide if better education was a thing. So I said, we are talking about K through 5 for the sake of this post. We should be encouraging curiosity and open dialogue with children to explore their feelings, their bodies, and health, ask questions in a safe space with safe adults who will listen, validate, and not shame or force any gender or identity on any child. We are talking about building community, acceptance, empathy, communication skills, not starting on hormone replacement at age 5. I've met children at the age of 10 and even younger who know their true gender and identity and who they are, many times much more than adults I know who are still confused about their sexual orientation. And I said, so it goes on and on and on. Well said. And then this last one was, parents should have the opinion to opt their kid out, just like they do or did for sex education in 5th grade, regardless of stance. Educators shouldn't be able to force their agenda or opinions on anyone. So it's a wide variety. It's a hot topic, which is why, of course, we're talking about this. But I think starting the conversation early is key. I think the bill completely puts us back. And I think that the bill is spawned from fear. It is spawned from misunderstanding. It is spawned from a cultural and religious trauma and just complete inhumanity to man, right? If you're loving your fellow man and you want them to be safe and happy, you want to be part of the solution. And this bill completely fucks that up. It is totally like this. I see this going all the way to the Supreme Court, and I don't know if I see a good outcome on this. We'll see who gets onto the court this year. But there's a lot of things the Supreme Court is and is not taking up. And this definitely needs to be one of them. And I think we should be talking about this in schools, just like fuck banning books. There should be no bans on books ever. I think that we should ban on books, education, freedom of press, freedom of speech. Like, where is all that? But education for children, equipping them with the verbiage, also the words. Oh, and I did say, like you said, Joey, we do active shooter drills in school. I have been present in the school for active shooter drills. They were terrifying to me as an adult, because you don't really know if it's a drill or not, first of all. Okay.
Yeah.
all we know is it's a lockdown, and me and the teacher are hovering these kids in the corner, barricading the door, ready to use our bodies to shield these little humans. And then of course, now you're talking about law enforcement and your interactions with law enforcement. So if we can teach our kids about how to interact with law enforcement without getting shot, right? Or how to behave at school without getting killed. We sure
Yeah.
shit talk about gender and identifying and all of that stuff in kindergarten.
Yeah. And I do want to get to the part of Julie wants to talk about. I just want to say this takes us back to a little bit about what we spoke about on our episode previously a couple weeks ago, which was queer baiting, because having these bills saying we can't say gay, we can't say use certain language, well, people are then going to queer bait people because of that trauma, because they're not able to articulate and express these conversations and it be normalized. And the trauma, I mean, I've been queer baited. I know other people have, many people, of course. It's traumatizing and it's really hard to move on from. And when we say we can't use, we're censoring people. We were just talking about censorship with the books. This is censorship. I don't know if like someone like Ron DeSantis knows what queer baiting is, or the people that signed the bill. They might not be familiar with that term. And I don't know that they wouldn't necessarily change their minds, but to other people to hear that, it all falls under the umbrella of this. And that, and Joe, I want you to speak about, the part of the bill you want to touch about now.
Yeah. To start with, when a bill like this is written, again, going back to punching down rather than lifting up, right? It does not matter how messy of a human being I am as a gay man when I came out of the closet. The very act of being able to say that out loud, to own that aspect of your truth, means that I have done more self-examination and more self-education than any of those jackasses writing that bill. And the fact that somebody out there is able to do even that modicum of work on themselves is intimidating to men. Thank you, toxic masculinity, where doing that is seen as inherently wrong. You are supposed to be stoic and ignorant. So we'll start there. But all this concern about safety of children and preserving innocence and whatnot, the bulk of homeless youth out there are members of the LGBTQ plus queer community, right?
Many trans youth.
Yes, youth, children, underage. What you are doing when you tell a required reporter, who is supposed to be a safe harbor for someone in distress and for someone in need, that they have to out a person who is not ready to be outed, you are, number one, inflicting one of the most emotionally traumatic things on another human being that you possibly can at an age where they can't even begin to have the mental faculties or resources to understand and process that. Number one. Number two, you are placing them in critical physical danger. Because, again, if every parent was loving and attentive and did correct by their children, we would not need CPS. You are putting children at physical risk for not only being kicked out of the house and left to the streets and then God knows what else because they have to survive, but beating and murder. You are endangering the life and well-being physically, mentally, and emotionally of someone by doing that to that child. And then you are putting the weight and the responsibility of emotion for whatever happens on the conscience of whoever is the required reporter. And that person will have to carry it with them for the rest of their days.
Yeah.
That I had to at least say that much on that aspect of it.
No, but it's very important you said that, and thank you for saying that.
Like all the layers, right? You have to look at the accountability factor and who's making the decisions in the best interest of the child. And what's the best interest of the child? Because you're right, there are parents who will freak out and disown and kick out or abuse or kill children who come out as gay. My daughter, she's 12 now, she has a friend who came out to her at 12. They're just barely 12, right? Who came out as gay. And I said, that's amazing. Again, precipice life lesson moment. That's amazing. We love her. Now, that's awesome. That's great. Though, good for her. What does she need? How can we support her? Right? You're teaching those things rather than, oh God, don't ever touch her again. Right? You got to teach love and community, but she has not come out to her mother yet. Her own mother. And I know her mother, so I'm not worried she's going to get abused. Okay. I'm not worried. I think it's just a matter of having the convo, right? And the coming out is different for everyone. You can't rush it. I mean, Jesus Christ, she's only 12. But she knows she has loving, supportive people around her. And I did tell her she needs help coming out to her mom. I'll totally help. I'll be there just to hold space. And as adults, we should do that. We have an obligation to make sure that these children not only survive their childhood, but they do so in a way that's minimally traumatic. Holding space for a child as they come out to their family is sometimes going to save their life. Okay. And so, yeah, it's it's so hard outing kids. You can't do that. There is no system in place. And the reason there's no system in place is because we haven't talked about it early in school. And we haven't equipped the kids with the words, the knowledge, the experience, how to talk about it. And we haven't shown them the proper way to care for one another because we don't talk about it. So the reason you can't out kids is because there's no support for them in school. I just had a friend whose daughter tried to kill herself. She survived second attempt, 12 years old. Found her unresponsive in her room. Tried to strangle herself because of the bullying at school, the relentless child bullying at school. So if you don't want to fucking talk about this in K-5, you think you're going to wait till they're in 6th grade? It's too late. Kids have already formed their opinions about what gay is, or what queer is, or what's normal, or what's right, and what's weird, and what's wrong. They've already formed their disdain, if you will, or their lack of compassion. So how do you fix it? You fix it by teaching early and teaching often and talking about it. This bill totally puts us back. And it's just going to make it worse. Like,
it just makes me so sad to hear that like such a young person didn't want to be on this earth anymore. And I'm glad they're alive, and I hope they're getting the help they need. But it's just like, it really just, it's mind-boggling me that parents can throw their own children on the street because of who they are, or for any reason that matter, not just their gender and sexual orientation, just in general. And how
there's
cruel.
No accountability in the school systems for this. I mean, they say bullying gets consequences, but it doesn't, because there's so much online stuff. There's so much, and the schools can't control it by then.
No,
you can't.
We're connected 24/7 now. You can't step away. We don't have that ability as a society anymore to do that. We've taken that away from ourselves. We've taken that away from the generation after us that have been raised purely in this age of internet and media and social media. They don't know how to step away, to even begin to process that, number one. And then when you do take away, again, because if you really want to see the most vicious group of people imaginable, sit on an elementary school playground during lunch hour and watch watch the bullying that happens. Like there's no filter. It just all comes out. And sometimes in those settings, that teacher, that school counselor might be the only safe harbor that child has. Yeah, I know as a high school kid in Central Texas, again, as I've described, where I went to school and grew up, my safe harbors were like the band room, the theater classroom, my chemistry teacher. A couple of those little places like were the places where I could go and I could proverbial let my hair down and feel safe. And most of those teachers I never had like the outing conversation with. You know, again, describing myself as a child, a lot of times it was just inherently understood, let's be very honest. But you though those were the safe spaces where I knew I could go and I knew someone was going to talk to me like a human being and I knew I wasn't going to be betrayed.
The same
Like
for
that
me.
is
I love how you had the band room, the chemistry teacher. For me, it was the band room, the chemistry teacher, and the library. In fact, my
yeah,
librarian in middle school, she and I still talk today.
yeah,
These teachers, they were your safe harbor. And
yeah.
I feel you on that. I was bullied relentlessly in school all the way through 8th grade, horrifically. Yeah, I learned how to fight.
Yeah.
I learned how to fight. Like I got into many physical fights just because I kept getting pushed around. I just got tired and I started fighting back. It wasn't a great choice, but it was just the way it happened.
Survival.
Yes.
It really was. I'm not a person who's violent at all, but you push a child, like sometimes things just happen. Like it's important. It's just so important for these kids to feel that the entire school system is safe. And when you have a governor who's at the peak, at the pinnacle of law in that state, trickling down to make the entire system not safe, is when it gets really scary. And I worry, I know this is going to the Supreme Court. This, I want our kids to be safe in school. I think we can all agree on lots of things, right? We want our kids to be safe in school. We want our kids to grow up happy and productive citizens. And we want to see them the least hurt. Like, I think all parents, generally speaking, we all want that.
That's
want
what you
right?
That's what they should want.
Why would you deny a child's happiness and safety and security for the sake of their orientation or the sake of their gender identity or the sake of their being queer or being gay or being different or being asexual or not knowing who the fuck they are? Like, why do they even have to know who they are? Like, why can't we just protect them and love on them? And I think ultimately it's because adults have way too much trauma that they don't want to unpack them themselves.
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
there's, the stigma of therapy makes you, broken, where it's no, go talk to someone who's not a friend or family and it's a safe space, or it should be at least, to gradually over time evolve and work on yourself. And like for me, the band room was one of the few places I felt safe. I played trumpet, but I was bullied till 12th grade. I was bullied from kindergarten to 12th grade. I was seen as the weird one because people could tell, because I didn't have a boyfriend. I didn't want to go on dates with boys. I went on like 2 dates with boys my entire high school career. I went to prom with a boy, but people could tell. Or I didn't want to wear makeup. I wanted to present the way I presented. And, it's hard. I can't, I can't think back to being like 16 years old being like, well, I like, maybe I like girls. That's why I don't want to go on a date with this boy. And it's hard. And I am proud of the fact that I live my life truthfully now, but that doesn't mean that there's not that trauma in the back of my head.
Yep.
I grew up going to therapy. It was interesting. My dad would go, my mother would never go. right? So that tells me a lot now that I'm an adult. But I think that children respond to therapists early in life, but there are things I will not tell my therapist today. And I think that becomes very dangerous as adults, because the trauma on top of trauma, the layers and layers and layers, and how it's just compressed over time. It's just so much. Like, how do you unpack all of that? There are not enough hours in the day to tell a therapist all about this mountain of grief, right? And even if I trusted the therapist, and even if we had years together, we still wouldn't get to all this shit. So the thing is if you do it early, right? If you equip kids with the verbiage and the power to speak, and the safe place in which to do it, they're more likely to use that time wisely. Whereas adults, many of us have things we don't talk about, not even in therapy. So it's just a disservice, I think, to the future. These are the future of our country, for Christ's sake. What are we teaching them or not teaching them? It's a disservice, I think, to our future.
And we spend how much time as small children in daycare, in school, being pushed into playing house and emulating an adult relationship in those circumstances, and being told, your little girlfriend, your little boyfriend, like you get pushed into those as a child anyway. It's this is nothing new. It's nothing inherently different. You're not wanting, like, no one's wanting to move beyond what already exists in this realm. It's just about acknowledging another person in the room while you're doing it. That's all that it boils down to. And instead you want to push them away and isolate. And I think after the last 2 years, because this weekend was the 2-year anniversary of Broadway shutting down, when so many of professionals in one of my worlds lost everything. I spent 2 months alone in an apartment, and then rebuilding everything after that, and those small bubbles. I can't think of any good reason why we should do anything to distance ourselves and alienate ourselves from one another as a people, particularly now.
Yeah, absolutely.
And kids are totally, like, have you ever met a 2 or 3-year-old that like rocks the baby like this?
Yeah.
Or like pushes in the stroller, puts a blanket over it, right?
Yeah.
They're born this way. Like, my youngest daughter never had a baby sister to emulate that behavior. She just did it. When she was 1, 2, 3, she would wrap her baby dolls in blankets and she would sit and rock them. Like, was seen to that. Like, so the thing is like, does it matter to you if it's a boy child or a girl child, or how are you gonna teach that behavior is acceptable? I had a friend who had a little boy born almost the same time as my oldest daughter, and they were both in the same daycare together, and the boy and my daughter were really good friends because they both played with ponies. And the dad was like totally okay with it. He's like, I'm gonna let him play it. If he loves it, he can do it. That's fine. Like, totally on board with it. No insecurities at all whatsoever. And I was like, that is the coolest thing ever, because ponies are the best. Like, you know what I mean? It's just because ponies were my number one thing. But so, like, you want your kids to just, they naturally are drawn to things. So what if he loves horses? Horses are fucking amazing. You don't have to be a girl of horses. Some of the best Olympic equestrian athletes are men. It's whatever, who gives a shit? But so let your child be who they naturally expresses who they are, and nurture that early and foster that. Don't shame them because they're rocking a baby.
So much of what happens with raising children in in our society, in most societies, but especially our society, I feel, is shrinking them down. It is concealing your truth. You look at the, like you're saying, the purity, the instinct. Children are some of the best characters. You know, just because they don't have that censor. You know, I love working in children's theater because there's just an inherent honesty. They're not sitting and watching politely. You have them or you don't. You know, everything is just pure. When we push them, when we push that away, when we strip those things away, when we tell them that their humanity is not acceptable, that is where those elements of darkness really start to come from, where the judgment and the hatred come from. You know, we talk about that, you know, especially the last 2 years when talking about, you know, race and ethnicity and other nationalities and immigration. But it's true for us as queer people, as heterosexual people, heteronormative, non-heteronormative, all of that. And again, I think, as you're saying, the insecurity thing, if you've ever had to question these things in yourself, you've done more self-work than the straight person that has never had to do that.
Yeah. Oh, 100.
Sorry.
100. I had that exact conversation with my therapist last Wednesday.
We need to do a new self-improvement book. Like, you know, I find more self-improvement books at like Goodwill for like less than $1. And it's funny that people throw them the fuck out. The Velvet
Red or Green books, publish that now.
Anyway,
3 of us will write it.
I always tell people, I'm like, the person you see, because people get caught up in the fact that I'm very outgoing and outspoken and sparkly, I guess, but I'm the product of 20 years of work. From severe anxiety, from severe PTSD, from trauma, from a bunch of things. And it's 20 years of work, this person. So, you know, pick up a book, but pick up the right books. And maybe what we could do, Lizzie, is create like a digital book recommendation thing for Rainbow Table Talk. As we have folks who come on the platform. What are you reading? What do you think is something people should be reading to, you know, kind of broaden people's horizons a little bit and their experiences? Like Joey just showed the Velvet Rage or Page?
Rage.
That's what I wrote down. I wrote Rage, but I was like, oh, maybe it was The Velvet Rage. I love that title, by the way. And we should just keep an ongoing list of recommended reading, because and even if it's or podcasts, we can also incorporate podcasts. People can do. Education is so key on stuff like this, right? People don't know what they don't know. So if we can help to plug people into the right resources, we can begin helping people evolve. And I don't want to say change, because we can't change anyone. that has to be their own work. But we can help people evolve by giving them the right tools and the right resources to help point them in the right direction. So we should definitely do that. And the other thing I was going to say is, oh yes, so I've always loved this quote by Mark Twain. He says, travel is fatal to prejudice, bigotry, and narrow-mindedness, and many of our people need it sorely on these accounts. Broad, wholesome, charitable views of men and things cannot be acquired by vegetating in one little corner of the earth all one's lifetime. Now he uses the term men. I think he's meaning human, right? When he wrote this, we weren't talking about things that we're talking about today. So please don't misinterpret what the quote is about. The quote in general, right? Listen, don't get bogged down, right? In all the little stuff. The quote is travel more, experience more, love more, understand more. Right? The more you travel, the more people you meet, the more places you go, the more you're going to understand the world. And I think that this is a game-changing moment in the world because we're all connected now because of the pandemic, right? We have internet accessibility, connectivity, we have Zooms, we have different platforms, we have social medias. We have ways that we can communicate with one another, platforms popping up left and right, like gremlins, pop, 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 right? And so we just need to be continuing to do that. Travel beyond the scope of your living room, go onto different platforms online and experience people and things like Rainbow Table Talk. This room should be full. There should be 100 people in this room every time we're at this doing this show.
Well, I can tell you the one reason this particular Sunday night it's not as full, but I won't.
I'm not worried. I'm not looking at tonight, right? Because it's going to go on YouTube and it's going to, the whole point is that it's one more thing that's out there that wasn't out there yesterday.
Yes.
And every day you can be doing something to be part of the solution and be putting positive change out there that's validating, but also trying to help evolve the old stoic. What did you call it? Wait, where is it? I was taking notes. The stoic and ignorant, the masculine, the stoic and ignorant.
Yeah.
That's what we want to do. That's it, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like one thing I will say about the Velvet Rage, like since we were mentioning books, it is focused on gay men, and it is in a more conversational way. It's from a clinical psychologist, but it's written in a more, within the community way, but anybody can and should read it if you want an understanding. You don't have to read the whole book. It's broken into 3 parts. It's about growing up as a little gay boy in our society, in the culture of toxic masculinity, what it's like, what it feels like, how you absorb the trauma, how people treat you. And then it goes through, finding yourself, figuring those things out, and then how you heal that in this toxic world. So just even that first part, if you want to have even a modicum of understanding of what it's like to be a little gay boy, it's something worth looking at. You can get it for $10 on Kindle. Like, it's fine.
Yeah.
But the other thing, as we're nearing the end, we've been talking about the Don't Say Gay bill. We act like this was something new. This bill is new. This is not new. We actually know what happens when this happens. There is a book out there, Harvard's Secret Court. Google it, you'll find it. It's like a tan hardcover or soft cover with like black gates. And it is about what happened in the 1920s when Harvard started rooting out their gay male students and outing them to their families and ruining lives and driving some of them to suicide in the process. Like, we know what happens when you start to demonize the community of people, especially when they're not fully formed, and what happens when you forcibly out them to people. It's literally in the education setting. It's a direct correlation in a college setting to this exact thing. This is not a hypothetical. It's not a hypothetical for anybody.
Mm-mm. And I would say, for those who will argue, well, I don't have kids or I don't have boys, right? I would say that none of that matters. Number one, you can be a safe adult for a child or a friend of yours to come out to. It doesn't matter if you have kids, you have a dog in this fight, because your attitude, your actions, your activity as an adult can determine if a child or a friend or a peer or a coworker or someone you meet on Zoom maybe deems you a safe person to come out to support them. So even though, yes, we're talking about the bill, and yes, it has to do with child education and whatnot, it matters to you. It should matter to you, because you, even though you might not have a child at that school, you can become a safe person and learn how to do that for someone else. And that is going to make all the difference.
Yeah, absolutely. And as we wrap up, we're about at our hour. As we wrap up, what are our, and Chanson, if you have any questions or comments, please feel free to type them in the chat or unmute. Thank you for spending the time with us. But as we wrap up, what are our final, comments, and what are we all, I mean, we know what we're going to do to move forward, but I hope what we can tell people to continue to do to make sure, we don't want to keep taking more steps back, right?
My big thing is remember that the work is never done. You don't have to fight every battle. We have a large community of people. Step up, take the swings, fight the fight you can fight. When you can't do it, let somebody else pick up the mantle for a minute and recharge. But understand that gains are not absolute, gains are not forever. You have to stay vigilant. You have to stay present. You have to be known in this world. That at the end of the day is the number one thing that you can do. Make yourself known, stay vigilant, and remember that the work is never done. When you think it's done, that's when you're going to get pulled backward.
Yeah, I love that. Always be learning, always be a student,
That's
right?
beautiful. And I like what you said, fight the battles you can, because sometimes it feels like we have to fight everything and we just exhaust ourselves to the point where we don't know how to lift those swords up anymore. And that's a very important, so thank you for saying that. It's very important. And
I just want to validate everyone who's here today, and thank you for including me in this talk. And anyone who watches this, down the road, I want to validate you, that you matter, you're important, your choices matter, how you feel matters, your curiosity matters, and your struggles matter. And if you're struggling, if you're having a hard time, know please that you're not alone on this journey. We're going to continue to fight the good fight, right, Joey? The fight the battles. But what's nice is that you're not alone and you don't have to fight alone. And so you don't have to carry all of it and you don't have to do all the work. Be part of a community, find a safe place to plug into that charges your battery, not drains your battery. And please know that whatever struggles are, they're not forever. They're not permanent. You're not alone. We definitely see you and we love all of you who are in this community. Let's, for the sake of the bill, let's try to stay focused on what's in the best interest of the child, right? If you keep the best interest of the child always in the front and center, I think we will make the best decisions for them.
And that's beautifully said, and I think a great way to end our time here. So Joey Paradise, Marissa Prada, Chanson, thank you for being here tonight. For those watching on Facebook, thank you for being with us there too. We will be back again in 2 weeks with my co-host, Maud Dukes. She sends her regards. She could be with us tonight, but Maud Dukes, we're thinking of you and we love you. And children are the future. Let's make sure they are valued and we do not censor them, and that we take care of one another. On that note, thank you for being here, everyone. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time. Have a good night.